Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Hazel Lavery, Events and Partnerships Manager and host for today's webinar, which shines a very important spotlight on sustainable gardening and biodiversity at stations. It's encouraging a more strategic approach, and I hope you're all looking forward to this as much as I am. Our panelists will demonstrate how groups can have significant impact via sustainable gardening by taking a longer term, more strategic, long-term approach and focusing on biodiversity and bioabundance. We'll be hearing from a range of panelists today with lots of information and ideas being presented. But please remember that however large or small any of these projects seem to be, starting somewhere and adapting to the space you have is key. Everyone can find ways of supporting our delicate ecosystems and have impact on longer term biodiversity, bioabundance and sustainability, no matter the size of your available space. And I'm sure that our panelists are going to be showing you examples of these later on. So I'm delighted and excited to be joined by all of our panelists. In the first half, we'll be hearing from Dr. Neil Strong, Biodiversity Strategy Manager at Network Rail. That's a mouthful. And we're welcoming the Tree Council for the first time on one of our webinars, which we're really pleased about. And representing them today is Adam Curtis, a Senior Officer on Community Planting Projects. After the break, we're featuring two fabulous Community Rail case studies from award-winning groups. We'll be hearing from Dave Carlisle and Janet Brayton from Friends of Buxton Station and Katrina Murray from Greening Arundel. But before we dive into today's exciting and vital session, I'll quickly run through the usual housekeeping. So a really quick reminder, please rename yourselves to include your organisation. So if you right click on your name, you should be able to rename. So your full name and your organisation, please. That's quite important for us. As you'll have heard, I've asked Hannah to record. The webinar is being recorded and it'll be uploaded to our website along with the presentation slides. There is the chat and Q&A function, Q&A button and a raise hand function to ask specific questions when we're at that point. I'll be introducing the Q&A sessions. You can use the chat option in the meantime for any general comments or ideas you'd like to share as we go along. And if you have any technical issues, Hannah is supporting in the background. So if you have any Zoom related technical difficulties, please text her with your name and she'll call you back when possible. Her number is in the chat and in your joining info. Feedback, it wouldn't be a webinar without me hosting, without mentioning feedback. The usual online feedback survey will pop up automatically as the webinar closes. So do please take a few minutes to complete this and of course anonymously if you wish. Again, that's really important for us. Okay, that's all the practicalities out of the way, and that's definitely enough from me. So now, back by popular demand, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Neil Strong to kick off today's webinar. So over to you, Neil.
Thanks very much, Hazel, and Hannah as well for inviting me back. It can't have been that bad last time round, so it's good to be back. So I think possibly even my job title may have changed. So I'm Biodiversity Strategy Manager at Network Rail, so I get to cover the whole of England, Scotland and Wales and look at all that fabulous green stuff we have next to those trains in the middle. And my presentation today will look at a bit of railway stuff, just to kick off, because I'd probably get a row from my employers if I didn't talk a little bit about the railway, but then tie it into the work we're doing, some of the work with the Tree Council, and Adam's talking next, and then hopefully tie into some of the other stuff we'll hear from other speakers later on. So hopefully you can see my slides already. Just a wee nod from Hazel will be useful. Yep, okay, cool, thank you. So that's my title. I've named it this because we've just relaunched our environmental strategy. It's now called the Greener Railway Strategy. We published one in 2020 and as things do in this space, everything moves so quickly, and we have now sort of refreshed and updated our strategy. And the area that's most important to me is that area of supporting nature's recovery. And hopefully, I'll now talk about how the railway can help that and then also help you in doing that. We have a lot of biodiversity on the railway. We also have a lot of stuff in the middle, which is the important bit. The second half of our company name is rail, so we have to make sure that we can do that safely and efficiently. It's public money that pays for it. And our estate is an operational railway. It's 50 odd thousand hectares, which if you squashed it all together is the Isle of Wight and a half. So there's a lot of stuff there. And those three images there are all from my side of things, the boring stuff in the middle, the bits that, the trains, the engineering, the electrification. There's 25,000 volts in those overhead power lines that we have across some parts of the network. So it's quite a challenging environment to have trains, but also then all that biodiversity at the side. And we have to manage it, and we have to manage all that vegetation and the habitats to make sure that we can do things safely and efficiently. And you will all know about leaves on the line. It is a real thing. The report front cover on the right-hand side is from an accident that some of you may remember in Salisbury about 4 years ago now, where two trains collided because one of them slid due to the adhesion problems they had on the railway. So we do have to make sure that we manage the vegetation that we've got next to the railway. And when we manage that vegetation, we then have to take account of the fact that it is doing other things for other wildlife. It provides habitats, but we also need to make sure that we're running that safe railway. And it's not just the leaves. When they're still attached to the tree and they fall over, it then also causes quite significant problems. I know I spoke about the image on the left-hand side last time I talked, with that train that hit the tree at 95 miles an hour, and luckily the driver was okay. We had a derailment in Norfolk just in February last year, which was caused by one tree falling into another tree, and then almost that domino effect, and they both ended up on the track, and that train derailed as well. So it just means that we have to make sure that we can also work with our adjacent landowners to reduce the risk of things like that happening. And basically, those habitats that we've got haven't always been there. It's the Victorians were very good at either blowing or digging their way through much of the British countryside. And the image on the left-hand side is the same place, more or less, as the photo on the right. It's Isambard Kingdom Brunel cutting his way through Berkshire to create the Great Western Main Line just outside Reading. And for the train lovers amongst you, that image on the right is one of the original HST trains that was on its test runs in the 1970s. But you can see from the left to the right the increase in the amount of vegetation, the levels of maintenance decreased once we got rid of steam trains and we moved into more electric and diesel trains. And so trees and what other plants and habitats sort of expanded their range and worked their way down. So they haven't always been there. And what we're managing now is all those habitats some 40, 50 years on, and how we have to look after that. But it provides us with a massive, great opportunity. I mean, as I say, we cover every local authority area. We go through every county. We go from the far north, Thurso and Wick, all the way down to Penzance in Cornwall, and everywhere sort of east and west as well. And we have a lot of opportunity to provide connectivity to allow plants and animals to move up and down the rail network where they might not get that opportunity in the agricultural land and the urban areas next door. So whilst managing that railway in the middle, we just have to make sure that we provide that place for the biodiversity to live and do its stuff. And this is where the strategy comes in. We've got a lot of support from across the business. The image in the middle, there's our Chief Executive, Andrew Haynes. And it's trying to bring across the fact that we recognise we want to be, you may say, simpler, better and greener. We've got to do things simpler, make it easy for people to do it. We've got to do it better, but also we can be greener. But we also need to make sure that the railway's still going to be there in another 200 years. It's our 200th anniversary this year from the Stockton to Darlington line in 1825. We want it to be there for another 200 years, and that will only happen if we look after the railway bit, but fundamentally if we also support that recovery of nature on the side. And so there's that fit for the future bit is the railway. And then the two pieces that are sort of more important and relevant today are the fact that we are caring for the environment whilst we're running the railway. And then also we know that we impact, we have 7 million neighbours just on the other side of the fence. So we need to help those communities thrive. And those are two of the ambitions. And this is my one. This is the supporting nature's recovery. And we just need to manage that land, as I've said, so that we can do those three things, but fundamentally bringing nature to the fore. It's often the poor cousin, the poor relation. And what I'm trying to do is make sure colleagues, when they're doing the things that they need to do, just take account of the habitats and the wildlife that they're working in and around when they do that. And then when we're doing that work and when we're doing all those specifications, we just need to make sure that we also take account of those communities that we're passing through, that we're serving and helping, provide that well-being. We all know that green stuff is good for you, and I'm sure Adam will talk a wee bit about that in his presentation. And whilst we support that nature's recovery, the way that we're looking to try and do this is to have two areas sort of fundamental. It's through management plans. If we know what we've got and where it is, and we've been working with the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology for a number of years now, mapping the habitats that we've got on our side of the fence, but also what's next door. Once we know where that is and what we're passing through, we can then tailor our management, not only to suit the trains in the middle, but also to tie in with what people are doing next door. And those plans are really fundamental to being able to do that. And then you take that extent either side of the railway, and this is where nature-based solutions come into their own. We don't have a lot of space. The distance from the rail to the fence across the network, the average is only 12 metres. Doesn't give us a lot of time to run a railway, have biodiversity, do nature-based solutions, and do all the other things that we need to do. And this is why we need to start working with those communities and those landowners who we go through. There's a third of the population lives within 500 metres of a railway line. So there's a lot of people who we can work with. And this is when nature-based solutions come into their own, because what they can do is they can reduce the amount of carbon that we're using in things like concrete and steel. They mean that you can change habitats, you can plant more trees. And as I'll talk about in a little bit, we can also work with some four-legged friends to help us managing some of that habitat. And where the habitat management plans come in is the image on the left-hand side is a site which was causing a number of problems, specifically with the leafal problems. Those trees were causing problems. There's a station just further down the line, and when the trains are needing to stop if they're sliding, then they go straight through the station, and that causes a number of issues, not only the safety ones. Now, traditionally, all those trees would have gone as far as the eye could see to make sure that no leaves anywhere in that county would have ever got anywhere near the railway. But with the plans, what we're able to do is look at how we can manage the habitat. We've managed to retain the hedgerows at the side, keep those alongside the fences so that they provide an extra barrier alongside the fence that we have to have as well. And then there's that opportunity to change the habitat on our side of the fence to look and see whether we can improve the quality of the grasslands that we've got, and then provide the abundance of pollinator species that we can get down that railway line. And then the nature-based solution bit, the term goatscaping is one that a colleague of mine coined. These ones are some goats that they've got up in the Manchester area, and they're using them specifically to help us manage Himalayan balsam in that area, because the goats can get very easily where my colleagues can't. We have to have so much paperwork and so much safety equipment, quite rightly, if we need to put colleagues onto the sides of steep slopes alongside the railway. Whereas these goats are quite capable of doing that themselves. I'm sure you've all seen those pictures I think it's in Italy, where the goats are climbing the trees to get to the good bits. And the great thing with them eating the Himalayan balsam is A, that they like it, but also B, and not going into too much detail in the biology, once the seeds have been through the goat, they no longer are viable, and so they are treating the problem but also not spreading the problem, which is an amazing opportunity. And they're nice, and it's a good thing, and it just shows that we can do this, and it's something we might be able to expand, because the other thing from a running the railway point of view, they're a lot cheaper than the human people that we've got. So it's another way, and it's also safer. We don't have to worry about our colleagues possibly falling down the slopes. So goatscaping is a thing that hopefully we will see more of along the railway. And then the well-being elements that I mentioned, and again, definitely Adam will go into this a little bit more, but we know that there are places that we've already planted trees. That image there is just up the line from me, where I am in Buckinghamshire at Gerrard's Cross. And colleagues at the Tree Council worked with volunteers we had from the railway, but also from Chiltern Rail to improve that patch of land just behind the platform. And the ideal thing here is that it makes the station look a lot better. Trains don't always run to time, you'll be surprised to hear. But if you're late waiting for your train, if you've just got to stare at a boring platform, it's just not a very nice place to be. But if you can just turn around and gaze at some of the new trees that have been planted, if it's the right time of year, you'll have the flowers on them, or maybe even some fruit, because I know they put in some fruit trees at Gerrard's Cross. It just makes the place look a lot nicer, and it's something that we need to get better at. The image on the left is a site in our eastern region, a place called Hadley Wood, where things went wrong. The specification wasn't right. We annoyed the community quite rightly because all the trees went, and we planted trees as a sort of as a compensation, as a recompense to the fact that we recognised we got it wrong. What we're trying to do more of, working with the Tree Council, is actually planting trees because it's the right thing to do rather than it's because we've done something wrong. The good thing about this site is that trees do grow quite well. And just in 4.5 years, that's the amount of regrowth we've had at that site. It's allowed us to get a lot of information, a lot of data about how we can establish hedgerows, how we can get things in the ground efficiently. We've demonstrated that actually, if you plant trees with volunteers, the survival rate of the plants is much higher than if we're paying contractors to do it. And so it's just it shows that if you plant trees with love, they survive. If you're just doing it for money, there's a number of differences with that. So it's a good way of demonstrating, and improving the biodiversity. The habitat has changed, but the biodiversity hasn't gone away. It's just slightly smaller, it's more manageable, and it's one that we can actually look after and maintain alongside that operational railway. Because in areas going through Hadley Wood, the trains that don't stop will be going at 125 miles an hour. It's not the place to be running through a woodland, but actually alongside a really nice native mixed hedge, it's the sort of thing to do. And again, it looks nice from the station platform as well. That, I think, is probably enough of me. And I will now hand over to Adam, who is going to give you the lowdown on some of the work that the Tree Council are doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to share my screen. Is that sharing now?
You just need to start your slideshow, Adam, and it'll be fine.
Okay, yeah. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so hello everyone. As mentioned, I'm Adam Curtis from the Tree Council. I generally work in the sort of grants department, and I do check out our website for the grants, the tree planting grants that are available. Network Rail support one of our grant schemes, but there's others as well. So we're going to talk. There's my title slide there, just talking about both sustainability and biodiversity at train stations. So I just thought I'd start with a definition for sustainability. There's all sorts of definitions out there, and you can get really involved in sort of the academic understanding of what we mean by sustainability. But I think to summarize it, I think we need to it's about thinking about the environment, how we can improve and maintain the environment, but it's always needs to be understood both in the context of our social needs and our economic needs. So if you can get the balance between those three things right, it's far more likely to succeed or grow and get better. I mean, an obvious one might be solar panels. If you put them on the a north-facing roof, you won't get enough sunlight. You won't get your financial returns, but south and east and west facing do. Okay, so talking about wildlife, if you think about it, I'm going to try and resist the urge of just talking about you might consider this feature for your wildlife area. There's so much information out there on sort of websites and books and everything. So what I'm trying to do is just focus on concepts to what you might need to think about to help you along with your plans. So thinking about wildlife, and I focused on sort of animal species there. We need to provide a number of things for them. Very simply, we need to provide them some kind of shelter or home, water and food. So if we can provide some animals, you could provide a pond, and that will provide all three things for dragonflies, but it might just provide the water for some birds. So just looking at the pictures there, if you plant a picture at the bottom there, just got planting a tree, obviously provides shelter and leaves for things to eat, but it provides a nectar source in the spring and berries in the autumn. So that's two additional food sources. And the picture on the right is a log pile. By piling logs up together, which might arise from doing clearance work, if you pile them together, you may need to do that to tidy up. But it actually means the logs in the centre will retain their humidity and their temperature much better all year round. And as the wood decays, it can retain the moisture, and it might provide food and moisture and a home for animals such as stag beetles. And the one on the right is quite a nice log pile because it's partially buried, so you've got underground habitat but a standing wood. Okay, so we'll just look at those one at a time. So a few examples of homes, how to think about it. The picture top left on the picture is an entrance into some kind of cave or mine, and it's been blocked off for the public. But you can see that they've retrofitted a plate with a bat with a hole in it, and they've cut the hole in the shape of a bat. That's to allow the bats to fly in and out. Particularly hibernating, they need to have a stable temperature that doesn't go up and down and below 5 degrees. So bats like to hibernate at some distance into caves and mines as opposed to at the entrance. And then down inside the cave and the mine, you can see there's a brick. They're specially made and for bats to hibernate and roost in. So the gaps in there are two different sizes for the different species of crevice-dwelling bats. And you can see in the middle crevice there's a little pipistrelle bat hibernating away. A bug hotel, I'm sure you've all seen them. Lovely to make. You can recycle all sorts of material. That one there is nice because it's you can see the railway line in the background. Putting up bird boxes, pretty obvious one. Cameras are lovely. You can get the cameras in them now and see what's going on. A whole variety of different types of bird boxes. The adder on the left is actually living under an old gravestone, so it seems to be climbing into the space underneath the grave quite creepily. There, and then the picture at the bottom. This is leaf cutter bees. All they actually need as a home is a hole drilled into a piece of wood. But those ones actually got out of my son's trampoline. They built those little homes there in the trampoline springs. And then the picture on the right, we've got the grass snake in the pond. That's quite obvious. But at the back, you can just see a metal plate that I painted sort of matte green. And the grass snakes used to hide under there overnight, and that would allow them to build their bodies up to temperature and go out hunting in the morning a bit quicker. So a refuge for them. Okay, so there's homes. Water. The obvious one is if you build a pond, it's great for wildlife, and there's lots of advice on wildlife ponds. Keeping them shallow, but just enough depth so they're safe, but also deep enough that they don't completely freeze. But just think about how we manage water. So the picture of the water butt is it's much better to top your wildlife areas up, especially ponds, with rainwater rather than chlorinated water. And if you do need to use chlorinated water, you can get some treatment for it, or you just try not to use too much of it. So my water butt, I've fitted on the top left picture, I fitted a pump in there with a float switch so that when it rains, it automatically pumps the water slightly uphill to where my pond is, and it tops it up with rainwater. I just need to remember to turn it off in the winter. The picture of the plant at the bottom, you can see it's a very furry looking plant. So overnight, you'll often get a dew settle. And if you've got plants and foliage and surface area, it'll catch the dew and then it'll hold it, in the environment for wildlife. Picture of mulch there. So putting down wood chip mulch allows any water that does come to not evaporate from the ground. It could seep underneath the wood chip. It's often quite damp underneath. If you haven't got space for a pond, even tiny small areas of water make a world of difference. There's just a blackbird in a bird bath. It's outside my kitchen window. But you can see all sorts of ideas, things like putting in a washing up bowl with fill it with pebbles, and insects will land and birds will land and feed from it. Okay, so there's a few ideas about how to keep water, catch water and keep water in the environment. And then food, so providing blossoms and berries, planting bulbs, wildflower meadows, so that's going to all produce blossoms. as a nectar source. And the bit at the bottom is just to remind that if you provide food for voles, you're also providing them for owls. So thinking about the ecosystem and the food chain as well. I've cheated slightly by showing the picture of the tawny owl box, but that was just to remind me to talk about the ecosystems there. Okay. And that owl box I actually made probably 10, 15 years ago. I treated it really well because I knew the landowner probably wouldn't maintain it, and it's had barn owls nesting it pretty much every year. So think about your current practices. I mean, I can remember when we used to cut our lawns and then bag the cuttings up and take them to the tip, or expect the bin men to take them away for landfill. They're now obviously composted. If they go away, and we have a brown bin. But if you set yourself up a compost bin, it makes it a lot easier, quicker to mow your lawn and or deal with all your vegetation. And that also provides a home for all sorts of insects. And the picture of the little grass snake there is because it's one of the places that grass snakes like to lay their eggs is in compost heaps on to warm up. And I don't know if you'll, I mean, I'm sure you'll remember slug pellets. It seems strange now to think that we used to buy that in vast numbers and sprinkle them all around our lawns. But by removing the slug pellets, you're leaving the food for, you know, the hedgehogs, etc., and the birds. Okay, so think about your current practices, do it easier, stop doing the things that are damaging. Removing obstacles. I've cheated slightly because we created an obstacle. So my son wanted a fish pond, which there he is. He's only about 10 in the picture there. He's having his first go at bricklaying, and he's built that little fish pond, which is absolutely delight. It's still great for wildlife, but it's quite tricky for the amphibians to get in and out of it. And they seem to find their way in, or at least frogs do. Luckily, I've got a couple of sons, and they're good at fishing the amphibians out. But I probably wouldn't recommend building like that if it's specifically for wildlife. But if you are building a pond like that, because it's better to have a raised pond, that's the space you've got, and it's a hard landscape. You could do things like provide a little amphibian ramp. Hedgehogs, again, I actually raised the gate in my house so the hedgehogs get underneath it, but cutting holes in fences for hedgehogs. And the box of frogs and toads, and I think there's a couple of newts in there as well. That's where they struggle to cross the roads, either getting squashed or they can't get over curbs. So that's really setting up a community group to help the amphibians negotiate obstacles. Okay, so just think about any obstacles that you've got that you can remove or design out. Okay, sustainable practices. So this is really thinking about what we do in all of our activities, but we're talking about, you know, here we go in our biodiversity management. So you could still make biodiversity management improvements and make them more sustainable. So the picture at the top is using a cardboard grow tube for trees as opposed to plastics. But there's now some really good bioplastics out there, and you know, plastics that come from renewable sources. And they're even making them out of sawdust and pine resin. They're a little bit more expensive. Our grants 100% finance them. And if they do rot away in the environment and you don't bring them in, they'd probably work out cheaper when you think about the labour costs of removing them. So water harvesting is an obvious one, top left. And then the strange thing on the tree on the bottom left is a watering bag. So these are great. If you've got in the first few years when trees are planted, it takes a little while for their roots to establish. In order to get, if you just sprinkle a hose on a tree, it can often, the water can trickle away or evaporate. So when you can get the water down into the roots, it really helps. The watering bags are really easy retrofit. You zip them on and zip them off, fill them up, and then the water seeps out of the bottom of the bag very slowly into the ground. But just focus on the ones on the right. So you've got some fencing there that's just been, the top picture is fencing that's been made out of just materials that have been cut from the site itself. And then the chestnut paling in the bottom of the top picture, and also the post and rail, that's actually cut from ancient woodlands. So you're doing, by buying in ancient woodland chestnut, sourced chestnut from coppice, you're actually helping to manage the ancient woodlands as well. And I had to put that picture of in that little lizard. So by having a boardwalk rather than a surfaced path, you're providing a home for lizards. They love boardwalks. They pop out the cracks between the boards, and sunbathe, and then if you come along, they then shoot back down the little cracks and hide again. Okay, so just thinking about your sustainability practices there. Okay, vertical space. I thought I'd include this because I'm guessing a lot of people are working in fairly limited spaces and fairly challenging. I wish I could say that the top right picture was my back garden. I have got logs stacked up in a similar fashion to that, but it looks nowhere near as nice. That's actually taken at Chelsea Flower Show. It's really quite impressive, very nice to live with. And you can see there's the insect hibernaculums in there as well, providing all sorts of different cavities and roost sites. Picture in the top middle. So we've got a very limited space, but you can see we've got a planter that's made out of recycled plastic. A great thing about them at railway stations is the recycled plastic's quite heavy, which makes it harder for people to move them around. And then you can plant in a spelea or a cordon fruit tree to train it up against a wall, or in this case along a fence line. So with really quite limited space, you can make a really nice contribution to the environment, relative to the space. Insects homes we've talked about. There's some bat boxes on the bottom left, and then the bottom right is a dead hedge. So in order to what to do with all the arisings from some cutting work, the dead hedge has been created. It can be done to create a barrier to stop people walking through an area, or it can just be done to help pile up the sort of the brash, the smaller stuff. And then the woven circles are actually designed to build into the dead hedge to provide cavity spaces for birds to nest into. Lovely community activity to do as well, building up a dead hedge together. Okay, presentation and perception. I'd suggest that the picture in the middle is neglect, isn't it? That's just where things have been dumped. Wildlife probably doesn't worry too much about that, but if you leave areas left for wildlife in that state, you're not going to get a warm reception, and you're going to get criticism, and it'll be expected to tidy them up. The picture below it is actually quite important for sand martins and house martins and swallows. So where that mud is quite wet, they were collecting that mud to build their homes. So that's quite an interesting one. The temptation there might be to sweep the road. So it's thinking about how you can maintain these areas and have them received well. So there's a signage on the right. That's an obvious one. And on the left-hand picture, we've got a signage that talks about why we're leaving the grass long. But what I really wanted to point out is, in addition to the area where the grass is left long, you've got a community orchard behind it with the mowing between it. They're cutting the grass one mower's width either side of the path. So that shows that they care about the general area. And on the other side of the hedge is actually an amenity space of mown grassland. So they've considered the leaving the grass long where it's the least awkward for people, and as part of the social needs as well. Okay. Species actions plan. So if we think about individual species, especially particularly key species or rare species, you may find that you can provide one part of the jigsaw puzzle that those species need. They'll also be using aspects beyond your site. So we just focus on the left-hand side. That's actually my local church tower, where they've built, I think, 30 swift nest boxes. So swifts live most of their lives on the wing. They only land to breed and nest. I'd like to think that once the population is built up and all of those homes are occupied, there will be young swifts looking for somewhere else to nest. So I've put up the swift nesting box, which is the top picture. I put up a few of those on the side of my house, and I actually play swift calls in the hope I can lure them in. I had similar experience with sand martins. It took 7 years for the sand martins to fill up neighbouring sand martin nest banks and then find the one that we built. But what was lovely is that we had those birds. Some of the birds were ringed, and maybe 3 or 4 years later, you'd have a message come through saying one of the birds that was born at your sand martin nest bank, this was in London, had turned up in Senegal. So it was absolutely wonderful success story. You may also find that you've got local groups that are interested. So you're undoubtedly going to have bat groups in your counties, and there'll be things you can do for bats specifically. Stag beetles, I understand, and you can forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but I understand stag beetles they obviously lay their eggs, and the larvae live in rotting wood in the ground. They're particularly associated if the geology is right for the right fungi to decompose the wood in the right way. So if you happen to be in the area for stag beetles, putting in stag beetle logaries is particularly important. And then the butterfly in the top corner is a white letter hair streak. They depend on elm trees for their larvae, and obviously the caterpillars. So they obviously with Dutch elm's disease, their numbers declined. You can now get Dutch elm disease resistant elm trees. So if you can plant those, especially if you've got, if you know that white letter hair streaks are hanging on in your area, then that's what we need to do to get the white letter hair streak numbers back up. Because that's just a bit about species actions plans there. Citizen science is really about understanding the wildlife we've got, and you'll probably find there's people that have got particular interests. So there's some pictures on. We've mentioned the sand martins and house martins and swallows. There's the swallows nesting in an outbuilding. The chap rings them. He comes out every year and rings them. There they are when they've just fledged, sitting on the telephone wire, and that provides the information. I do bats. I've been doing bat surveys for 20, 25 years. So every year I go out and I walk the transects and I count bats. And whilst the data I'm collecting doesn't make a huge difference on its own, alongside the sort of 400 or 500 other people that do bat transects, it actually monitors the national population. This also gives me an excuse to go out for a nice walk in the evening. That's a picture of a nocturnal bat there, but the transect there is a Dorbentin's bat's transect that like the water. Butterfly transects people like to do, and then a lovely event is moth trapping. So you put a light out overnight and a light trap out, and it lures the moths in. And in the morning or even in the evening, you can have a look and see what you've caught. That's a lovely activity to do there. And I think I'm getting near the end now. The one thing I would say is in everything you do, think about how the community are going to use it. I take the argument there's probably some rare wildlife in the country that is vulnerable to disturbance, but wherever possible, which is most places, access to wildlife and enjoying it is just makes it far more robust, far more likely to be treasured and looked after. It's there for us to enjoy. Few pictures there. So the bottom left picture is a play area, but the play structure has been created with living willow, but it's primarily somewhere for the children to play. But how much nicer than putting in a solid structure. So the Gruffalo obviously celebrating Deadwood and Gruffalo, and that's actually my son at a community orchard open day, and they're pressing apples in the apple press, and he's drinking them away there. And then the bottom right is just providing information about what wildlife might be in a pond as well. So I think, so that concludes my talk. Thank you. And I'll pass back to Hazel now.
Thanks, Adam. Wow, that was a whistle-stop tour, and what a fabulous amount of information between you and Neil. And just to reassure everybody, somebody has actually asked the question. The presentations will be made available on our website, and this recording will be available as well. So you don't need to remember everything today. It's, hope that you're feeling really inspired. But we are now going to move on to questions. So I don't know if there's any questions in the chat. Is there anything in the chat, Hannah?
There's nothing come in yet. Everybody's been absolutely absorbed in the presentation, so they haven't had time to put anything in the chat yet. So we'll give everyone time to form their thoughts and
I think somebody's got a hand raised.
Okay, here we go. I will.
It's David Wisehall, I think. So.
Hello, Hazel. Yeah, fantastic. From both representatives. Is Dr. Strong still on the call?
Yeah.
I've got a question for him.
Yep, still here.
Hello, is it Dr. Strong or Neil?
Neil will do, or you, it depends.
Okay, thank you. We've got a particular situation at our station in Staffordshire. We're creating a community hub on the station, and it involves clearing the land of round about 20 trees. Now, we've, as part of the planning application, we've had to have a BNG survey done. We've applied the DEFRA biodiversity metric, and from that, it's not a very pleasant situation, unfortunately. It's a horrendous amount of money that if we go off site, they have quoted us for increasing the BNG by 10%. Are we able, because it's Network Rail land and we are in the process of leasing it from Network Rail, are we able to transfer the BNG to more Network Rail land?
Tricky one. Just a question.
I mean, if
you're going through
Yeah, go
planning
on.
for this piece of work,
It's for change of use of land, because we are creating a community hub as well. We've bought a railway carriage to go on the site too, because the
Okay.
station has got no facilities whatsoever.
It's there is maybe something as rather than getting into the weeds of it. That's the wrong phrase. Sorry. At this point, it may be something that if you can get my details from Hazel, I'm happy for you to
Yeah,
put me a line, and I can
I
link you with
yeah,
some local colleague. It seems I've got to be careful what I say because you are recording. That there a lot of the management around biodiversity is the right thing. We need to raise it, especially where it's being got rid of for certain reasons. But this seems to be a case where, a bit like some of the work that we do, the biodiversity will still be there and will benefit from what you're doing. It's just a slightly different shape or size or species. And so having to go through that process of increasing it, and the 10% doesn't seem quite the right thing. That might be way out of line for me, but happy to link you with colleagues in the area if you drop me a line.
that would be fantastic if Hazel or somebody can mutually put us in touch. That'd be brilliant. Thank you very much.
Not a problem at all, David.
Yeah, I've actually just put in the chat, David, for you to email our events email, and we'll put you in touch with directly with Neil. Okay,
Lovely.
thank you. So we've got some more hands up, I believe, and I think Sarah Newman is next, if I'm right.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, Neil, I think we might have been corresponding about wildflower corridors. Where we're based, it's got some amazing habitats and 7 nature reserves and triple SIs everywhere, and fantastic country parks. And I've been looking at supporting that through as the line goes through the valley, how we could use the railway line as a kind of bridge between all those fantastic habitats. And I remember reading about some trials going on with wildflower corridors along Network Rail land. And I didn't know whether you'd had any results on those or what kind of feedback you'd had, how possible it is really.
Yes, we were doing some work. So that photo I showed where we'd cleared all the trees, that led to a government review of how we manage our work, and then we did some trials to see how easy it was to change habitat, and it's not easy.
Right.
We managed to find out. The plants, it's what we are looking at. We need to sort of work with nature. We can't work against it, as many of you on the call will know. And this is where some of the comments I was making to David about the biodiversity metric and that element of, that's one area we were trying to go. If we change it for this, it scores more, therefore we get more numbers, therefore we are able to close out the 10% things. Whereas actually the biodiversity, as hopefully some of my slides showed, grows on the railway regardless of what the stuff is. It doesn't care if it's good for it. Our land is relatively undisturbed. So what we have to get right is the maintenance regime, which will help the sort of the types of species that you're talking about. And it's in that management. This is where the management plans come into their own, because we'll then know what the railway's doing. We'll know what the habitat we've currently got, and then how we should be managing that to support both. And one area that will help is creating those open spaces in amongst areas where we've got lots of trees. That'll get the light to the ground, and then we're almost relying on the seed bank to help us and actually let come back what is able to within the seed bank. And we're quite lucky in that we've not ever applied fertilizers to our soil, so they're quite low in nutrients, which is really good for those wildflower species. So it's that sort of management that we need to get right, rather than trying to go in and throw a whole load of seeds down. It works well when you've got a whole bunch of topsoil, but it's more actually working with the seed bank that we can. But does that help? Sorry.
Well, I mean, I can see going up and down the line that there's plenty of life either side. It's just, if it's covered in brambles, then I mean, we're in chalk grassland.
Yes.
Brambles
Brambles are a challenge for our colleagues as well, because they do tend to get in the way, and the safe walking routes and things like that. So it is something that we have to manage. We just have to recognise that there's things that quite like the brambles as well, which is and they're really good for keeping people off the railway as well, which is another challenge.
Okay, is that okay, Sarah? We'll just move on to the next question. Hannah, are there some questions in the chat?
We've got Jane Wild has a hand up, and then we've got 2 questions in the chat which are potentially related. I can see Adam's answered one. So Michael King is asking invasive species. Is there a way for community groups to help identify invasive species? I'd assume Network Rail would manage the response rather than the community group manage it. That's the question. And then there's another question from Mark at Just Good Friends Club. They've created a small community garden next to the station. They've adopted nearly 1,000 square meters. Could Adam advise on what small non-invasive tree species would grow well on there? Adam has put an answer in the chat, so I'm not quite sure how best to manage those 2. They're kind of related, but potentially detail.
And are those both for Adam? No, they're not.
No, the first one.
First one's for Adam. Go on, Adam.
Yeah, so I'll answer the first one, and then I'll make a comment on the second one, and then if people want to sort of add to or bring in other views, that's fine. So I think the key thing you're talking about is limited space. You've only got 1,000 square meters, so you're looking at smaller trees. And obviously, if it's near the railway line, I know trees with particularly large and sort of robust leaves are problematic. I'd suggest that the species that we often plant in traditional native hedges would be the sort of ones to go for. So if you look at tree suppliers, they'll suggest hedging trees. They tend to be smaller. So native trees are generally better for wildlife than non-native trees because the ecologies evolved with them. And if you've got blossoms and berries, then that provides colour and delight for us, but it also provides food sources. So not an exhaustive list, but things like hawthorn, rowan, dogwood, maple, hazel, spindle, gorse, broom, buckthorns. I would say blackthorn as well, but blackthorn has some really quite big vicious thorns on it, and it spreads vegetatively, so it can regenerate and form sort of clumps as it regenerates from its roots. But it's a lovely one. So if it's appropriate, it's a lovely one to put in because it's pretty much the first one to come into blossom very early in the year, and you can make sloe gin from it. There's others as well, but that's ones off the top of my head. Dogwood's lovely because you get stem colour in the winter, so it just looks lovely in the winter, and you can get variegates that are sort of yellow and red looking. And then I keep going on about planting hazel. I want to start a one-man campaign to get everyone to plant hazel in allotments. The great thing about hazel is traditionally coppiced. Coppicing's fallen out of sort of commercial use, especially with hazel. Less so with chestnut, that's still going. It was cut to provide poles, perfect for growing beans or peas against. So I think allotments should plant them and then stop importing bamboo. But you can then, you could plant hazel, and then you could coppice it every sort of 3 to 7 years, maybe a little bit longer, once it's established, once the roots are established, and that would keep it quite small and provide you with some materials. So the other one, it was a quick mention on invasive plants. I did my first degree on invasive plants. So they tend to be plants that can somehow dominate and displace other plants from the sward. So particularly ones that aren't eaten by anything, produce lots of seeds or spread by rhizomes and roots. There are some particular ones out there that people know about, like knotweed is invasive. I guess, I don't know if the question is knowing about identifying it. If you can take a photograph of it, you might be able to email it to people who'll be able to identify it for you. A really good way of cheating is to take a photograph of it and then do a Google search for the photograph, and it will more often than not correctly identify a plant for you or give you somewhere to start looking at as well. And then that might be able to narrow down what it is. You could probably get advice on how to get rid of it by contacting people. Things like Wildlife Trust might be able to advise, or local sort of countryside staff. Okay.
Actually, Adam, Neil's put in the chat that if anybody does identify Japanese knotweed and Himalayan balsam, he's asking for them to report it to Network Rail, and there's a number there in the chat for that.
Yeah, and those two in particular are particularly aggressive, and you really want to get on top of. Yeah.
And I just want to come to a comment that Jane Wild has put in. The Woodland Trust often supply free hedgerow trees. Do you know about that?
Yeah, so Woodland Trust will pass out packs for you. They tend to be quite small, but they're really good. They just send out a pack, and it's very quick and easy to get a small number of them. Check out our grants as well. So our grants start from as small as £250. £250 is our smallest grant, and then our largest grant goes up to £40,000. And you can always contact me through the Tree Council, and my role is I try and engage with people prior to them submitting the grant, so that we can, if we can, just check out what people are applying for and what they're thinking, and improve sort of the quality of their applications. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. So Jane, you've been really patient. Would you like to come in and ask your question now?
Hi, yeah. There's been a lot of talk about community spaces, etc., which is great. We really only have the station itself. So I was wondering if there are any tips on trying to make that a little bit more biodiverse. Because obviously most of the planters are inside the station. So we have resorted to the usual suspects like geraniums and things that do quite well in the heat. But I would be very keen to maybe add something that is a little bit more biodiverse.
Yeah, so if it's I'll chip in on that one. If you're really struggling on space, it's thinking about introducing things into, probably, I'm guessing, fairly a hard landscape, lots of brick and tarmac and concrete. So I do think the thought of putting in sort of planters and vertical space. I didn't really mention it in detail, but if you can put up a trellis. And then you can't put up a trellis and climbing plants.
No, the station's very specific about what sort of areas we can use. They don't want anything like walls. They don't want trellis. We've actually managed to sneak a couple of planters in below the notice boards, but only as long as we keep the planting low. And of course, it's indoors, so it's under glass, which means it can get quite hot, but surprisingly cold in winter.
Okay, so it sounds like it's it's actually indoor space.
Yes, it's inside the station, which has got a glass roof. It's a Victorian station.
Yeah, but you're not going to want to encourage sort of native wildlife like birds and rodents and amphibians to come inside.
Probably not, but I was thinking, I'm sure a few insects could possibly make their way inside.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're really limited into things that might attract insects to come in and out.
I think so, yes.
I mean, I'd personally be thinking most people aren't offended or worried about a butterfly. Yeah.
No, I hope not.
But obviously they would be if it was large amounts of gnats. So I'd probably look at the butterfly conservation charities, look at species of plants that might attract them in. that I think you're very it's fairly limited and specific and specialized of what you're looking for, because you're trying to get wildlife inside. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm
you'll
not
want to keep it
sure.
quite limited.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about butterflies though, because couldn't they get stuck under the, they come in and then they tend to fly upwards and get stuck under the
Yeah,
glass.
you'd have to leave windows
No
open
one
and
could
things. So,
rescue them.
but other than that, you're really then looking at house plants, aren't you?
It kind of is. I mean, we have got
I'm really
some
sorry,
sort of outdoor plants.
I'm gonna have to
Sorry.
jump in.
Yeah, fine,
Actually,
fine.
we're sort of
Yeah.
running over for break. Adam, would it be okay if I pass your email on to Jane
Yeah, that's
and
fine.
get her
That's lovely.
to sort
Thank
of
you.
liaise directly with you? Is that okay?
Someone's
Yes,
also
of
put a
course. Yeah.
really helpful comment in the chat just relating to that from Catherine Chalice at Friends of Almouth.
Oh, great.
Okay,
Numerous
will
large
do.
planters of herbs at the station, not native, but would cope with heat under glass and good for attracting bees,
Great
butterflies,
idea, yeah.
etc.
Okay, thank you.
Some
Thanks a
fragrant
lot.
herbs.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Hazel,
you
do you want to
so
pass
much.
my details on as well? Because it will be the train operator's decision, but the train operators also have the same biodiversity targets that the rail industry does, and so they may need to look at what they're advising at the moment, and colleagues in Southern Region for Network Rail may be able to help with that as well. So if you pass my
Okay,
details on
lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Neil. So we'll pass both of your details on. Okay, smashing. Thank you. I'm really sorry. We're going to have a little bit of an extended Q&A right at the very end. So anybody who is wanting to ask a question now and hasn't had a chance, you'll get a chance later on. But we are going to take a break. We're a little bit late starting it. So we're going to take 10 minutes. If you would come back, I'm working out my maths now. So if you'll come back at just, let's say 10 past 3, please. That would be great. Okay, and I'll see you back very soon. Start recording, Hannah. Okay. Right, thank you everybody. Hope you enjoyed that little break and stretching your legs. I am delighted to welcome our next two presenters, our next two panelists. First of all, we have Dave Carlisle and Janet Brereton from Friends of Buxton Station, and they will be followed by Katrina Murray from Greening Arundel, and both have got some wonderful, wonderful information to share with you. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Dave, and I'll be sharing slides on Dave's behalf. Okay, over to you, Dave.
Lovely, thanks for that introduction, Hazel, and bonjour everyone from northern France, where it's absolutely glorious here at the moment. I'll start off by saying that when I was asked to do this webinar by the events team, I sought inspiration, not quite knowing where to start. I found stimulus in a famous poem, The Way Through the Woods by Rudyard Kipling, if anyone knows it. It talks about an abandoned ugly road that goes through a once navigable wood, and it becomes overgrown, it's hidden by trees and vegetation. It highlights the resilience of nature and its power to revive and to recover, to the extent of growing back over a well-constructed tarmac road to conceal all traces. In essence, what this project and similar ones are all about is that given the right conditions, nature's got tremendous power to heal itself. And we're aware how climate changes and other threats challenge nature. And this project is all about spotting damage, addressing it, helping it, and measuring to show the effectiveness. In terms of scale, we took on certain things, and your station will be different. Your biodiversity management plan will be specific to your site and your needs and your inputs. You might take on some of the ideas that we talk about, others will be alien to you. And our advice is this: be a magpie, take only those shiny things that are right for you, and anything that you do is a positive step forward. Going on to Mr. Kipling, he also told me where to start this presentation by explaining all about his 6 honest fellas. I say me, but I'm pleased to say that I'll be joined by Janet, one of our volunteers who actually led on this project, and she's got more of the practical things to talk about. Though, here we go. So the 6 honest serving men are what? The important word here, next slide please, Hazel. The what is it's a pilot project with proven, that's the important word here. It sets this project apart from similar well-intentioned nature recovery missions. The things here are assessed and measured by an expert team of ecologists. The BNG that's mentioned there is biodiversity net gain, and it's currently used as a yardstick by many to show bio improvement. In fact, the planning laws in this country aim to ensure that new developments leave the natural environment in a measurably better state than before, requiring a minimum 10% net increase in BNG. That's a mandatory requirement for most developed projects. The why, it's to address gaps that are present at stations, and it's to find those gaps. They become then the target species, and target species might need help to return, to settle and to thrive at the stations, and they become the project prompts. The when, initially involving 6 northern stations, was designed to start in April 2024, but it actually dribbled on until autumn 2024. I'll talk about who in a second. And so after the delayed start, we're underway. We've got 6 pilot stations. The how is in the GIS record. It's in the simplest terms. It works when a team of expert ecologists take a look at what's going on and they do a GIS mapping survey to record species found. The GIS stands for Geographic Information System, and it's the process of creating maps using specific software to combine spatial data, that's where things are located, with attributive data describing what those things are. This then creates an interactive and dynamic map that can be used for analysis and decision making. In reality, the recording was a bit more complex than that. Holly Fisher, Nature Recovery Manager from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, explained about using 3 indices to score it. The first one is a biodiversity index, and that's determining how strategic the station is in terms of nature recovery, and therefore what role the station could potentially play. The second element is the biodiversity calculated by an on-site value using a DEFRA formula that was first published in July 2021. It's a very specific tool that ecologists who've got competency will use to measure and come up with a score. And the third element is the green space, and that's how simple value of how much actual green space exists. So Derbyshire Wildlife Trust also added additional weightings with wanting to inspire and connect people to show how their station, our station, fits into a wider landscape using local conservation priorities. And they also wanted to introduce the well-being element, so to get people to sit and think and understand what's going on with this project and similar projects. So in summary, the GIS survey asks questions about what species ought to be present. It provides a list of gaps to be filled. They become the target species, which in turn then prompt target interventions, and the project's all about measuring, so progress can then be measured and shown to prove the BNG. The where, 6 stations are listed up there in alphabetical order, no other reason, and the idea is that this will be piloted starting at Buxton, which became the flagship to where it all happened at the start, and then the idea is it's a laudable, admirable proof of getting across all the northern networks, all stations. The who is Northern Derbyshire Wildlife Trust and ourselves, Friends of Buxton Station. Next slide, please, Hazel. When FOBs got involved, we negotiated this list here as a workable way forward. We became equal partners, investing time and effort alongside ecological expertise of Derbyshire Wildlife Trust and the financial support of Northern. The shopping list idea found great favour with us. We couldn't do everything all at once, but we ticked things off, and essentially things were led on a priority basis. The question was asked, the third point there, about skills. Did we need any skills developing? Well, we didn't have, nor did we want any expertise, preferring the instructions to come from those ecological experts. We didn't want to be the people making decisions about the interventions. Phase 1 kicked things off. We had to start somewhere, of course, and we were greatly helped by colleagues from Northern and Network Rail who generated plenty of time for us in their volunteer days. We're very pleased about that. Janice will speak about that in more detail. Phase 2, we installed the wellbeing area, and it was artistically enhanced by More Care Design Collective, a community artist group with artists who have significant mental health issues, and we were able to give them a voice through our joint working. Signage was important. We needed to know why this project was happening, and it's one of Mr. Kipling's honest men. Phase 3, a few plants initially failed and these were replaced, and other new ones came along and more volunteer days were granted. So thank you again. We're not finished. There's 4, 5 and 6 potentially coming, which means there'll be follow-up measurements by the GIS survey haven't been done yet, but anecdotally we have seen insect life thrive on the station. So maybe a result of this much milder spring, but it's great to see anyway. This template has got all the hallmarks, and the bottom right-hand corner there shows you a traditional feedback loop. You set things up to see if something needs doing, you come up with a shopping list of ideas and interventions, you do them, you try them out, and then you go back and you check your progress, you measure, and then feed back into your start point and change things if necessary. Next slide, please. Please don't be put off by this. This is a huge slide with lots of stuff on it. But when it becomes a handout, have a look at it. This is all the stuff that was promised on the shopping list that we could or couldn't do. Some of the stuff we've done, some we won't do, and you may choose to do some of this yourselves. Even if we just do one thing, we're doing good. Native wild plants were representative of meadow and woodland species, and they are designed to live in our locality. It's quite a tough area. I'm sitting in the sunshine today, and Janet's sitting there with a thermals on. It's a cold, rough place for plants to thrive in Buxton. It's important that I highlight just a couple of items of the feedback, and Janet will go on to explain more, that communication is absolutely vital if we're going to share agendas. And the ongoing commitment to look after new plants can be huge, particularly when watering them. Massive issue this warm spring. And again, Janet will say more on this. Next slide, please, Hazel. This is the before photo. Note the empty space to the right of the phone box there. There's nothing on the walls, there's nothing on the floor. And it's a bit odd, but we're taking the photograph on the next slide from the other angle, looking back towards the phone box. So bear in mind there's nothing there. Next one, please. That's looking now back towards the phone box from the bottom of platform 2. We've got the half barrel planters with plants in. We've got the seating, the well-being area. We've got wall hanging racks, and we've got the artwork by MCDC, More Care Design Collective, which actually introduced quite a lot of questions. People said, what's that got to do with railways and the rest of it? The next slide shows that we put up an interpretation panel. Can I have the next one, please, Hazel? It's designed for quiet contemplation. This area was designed by the artists, and they came up with these figures as representative of themselves, and it's prompted by ancient Rome and ancient Britain, and the characters with mental health issues designed these characters, and that all explains that on the interpretation panel there. And that's me enjoying the sunshine in Buxton on one of those days when it did sun. Can I bring Janet in on this next slide, please? So if you want to just quickly run through this, Janet, over to you. I think you need to unmute, Janet. Just if you just click your audio.
Sorry about that. As Dave said, we're quite lucky. We already had the existing grit bins and barrels. So the first thing we needed to do with Derbyshire Wildlife Trust was to go around and see which barrels needed replacing, because some of them were quite old and would fall to pieces as soon as we took the plants out, the existing plants out, and which plants could be replaced. Dave negotiated the donation of a significant amount of compost from our local refuse centre. Again, lots of work went into organising the many volunteers to get the work done effectively. Like I say, 25 barrels, 4 or 5 grit bins, and the biodiversity area, the new biodiversity area. Along with that went answering loads of questions about what should we plant where, because as Dave said, we're not the experts. Emptying and moving the rotten barrels, drilling the barrels, adding drainage grit, stones and compost to them, and deciding what plug planting, seeding went where. We were quite lucky. We did get some contributions of drink and biscuits, which always helps with the volunteers when we were doing this work. And ongoing, we have a monthly meeting at the Buxton station, and that includes monitoring and weeding of the planters and decision making, which is quite big for us, about whether the weeds are local and should be left or not. The watering element, as Dave has already alluded to, is always an issue, and so we're very, very dependent on the over and above normal contribution from the volunteers. Next slide, please.
Is this the right one, Janet?
Next one, please.
Next one.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. What went well? Inter-organisational working. There were a lot of, as Dave said, Network Rail, Northern Rail, Derbyshire Wildlife Trust and the volunteers. We were quite lucky in that we had a dedicated project manager from Northern Rail. So she was able to manage the start and end stages and made sure that things happened when they were supposed to be happening. We were very lucky in that we had access to a local floral expert. So when we were asked what plants we wanted from a huge list, we were able to go to him and he was able to say to us, yeah, this will work well, this won't work well. We were involved in discussions so we could input into ideas, particularly if it impacted on the volunteer commitment. And as I keep going back to the watering issues, lots of volunteer help. And I think that's led to a more biodiverse Buxton station. When I was there the other day volunteering, we had lots of insects and bees on the plants. And we also have the birds involved as well. What would be better if involvement in discussions from the start, so to confirm realistic expectations, more taps. We only got one tap installed due to cost and access. One is better than nothing, so we're very grateful for that. We did discuss water butts and rain collection, but it just wasn't possible because we've got cast iron downpipes and the potential for vandalism. And another thing that would have been better, key staff moved on, so some of the information was lost during the handover, so we had to go over things again. The next steps for Buxton, we are going to create a bug hotel, and we've got on-site metal, scrap metal, and also the metal from around the barrels, looking at what grows and what doesn't so that we can learn from that, and a possible survey in the future to test the public experience, especially about the, how it affects Buxton Station and the biodiversity area to see if it gets used. Over to you, Dave, and next slide, please.
Yeah, just before I talk about this next slide, there's a couple of things there that I think are worthy of just highlighting. Yes, we promised to do a lot of things, and we selected from a list, a shopping list we called it. Repurposing stuff that you've already got. We talked about the scrap. We've got an old metal cabinet that we're going to turn into a bug hotel. That's using what's already there. There's nothing new. It's just repurposing. Similarly, the yellow grit bins. Becky from Northern came along to us and said, Northern are getting rid of the grit bins. Do we want to do something with them? Oh, of course we do. We want to turn them into planters. And one of these planters is yellow, bright. Well, they're all bright yellow. But one we've painted up blue and yellow in the colours of our Ukrainian flags. And we have a Ukrainian group in Buxton who now look after that at the station. It's become their yellow grit bin. It's repurposed it. It's given them a sense of pride and a sense of belonging. And it's given them a voice in the community. So it's so lovely. If you just look at your stations, you don't have to bring in new stuff. You don't have to work really hard with new things. Just use what's already there and repurpose it. It's lovely to be like magpies in many different ways. And scale it to you. Choose something that's right for you. It's lovely, and this is laudable, this statement from Mike Rowe, the Safety and Environment Director at Northern Trains. And he said it's specific what we did at Buxton. Our biodiversity ambition is that every environment around every station is welcoming to nature and actively supports it. So it's looking to the future, which is wonderful. And the interventions at Buxton were unique to Buxton. They were checked by these expert ecologists, and they designed and said what needed to be done here to address the gaps and bring back species that should be present at Buxton and ought to be, and they will be. And the important thing right at the very end is wants to go to all stations across the Northern network. That is tremendous to see. This project was shortlisted for a 2005 Community Rail Network Award. We wanted to share our ideas and Northern support of this as a great idea, and we took it to the CRN Awards. It was wonderful that information got out there. Take from this presentation what will be useful to you. We think the BNG proof element, the biodiversity net gain proof element, is really important because we can measure success. We can show that the work we're doing is actually having an effect, and it's having a positive effect. Anecdotally, we can see it happening. Practically, it'll be proved, I'm sure, at some stage when the GIS survey is carried out again. that's really all I want to say, and Janet wants to say about this. I think we've caught up a little bit of time. I was conscious of I might have been running over, and I think I forgot we started late. So my apologies. I've gone a bit quick through some of that, which will probably prompt a few questions like, why the hell are you going so fast? But I think it's incumbent on me now to hand over to Katrina Murray, who will talk about greening Arundel. And I'm quite excited to hear what she's got to say about that.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you very much.
Sorry, Katrina, I'll just be 2 seconds getting your presentation ready. So over to you.
All right, great. Well, again, thank you so much. I feel that there's been such a tremendous amount of valuable information shared so far. I'm hoping that my information will add to it. I hope it does. One of the things I wanted to reiterate is that I mean, Arundel is a small place. We have 3,500 inhabitants, many of whom are a little bit older. And so, you know, the scale of what can be done here is to some extent limited. Like Dave, I just want to say that you'll see what we have done. And in many ways, it's a shock to us how much we were able to achieve in the last couple of years. And I hope that it will actually be an inspiration to you. But take what you will, leave what you will, and let's just hope that it's useful for you. So thank you very much, Hazel. So 2 years ago, basically, we were trying to be a good station partner in Arundel. That was our ambition, and that was our initial sort of thought process. Sorry, I hear something else on the line.
You're muted, please, apart from Katrina.
It's Jane Wild. I'm just trying to find the setting.
And you know, here we are 2 years later, and we're thinking about becoming accredited as a nature town. So that gives you a little bit of a hint as to, you know, the progress that we have made over that period of time. I should say that my husband and myself arrived in Arundel in 2022. So we were newcomers, and we now know, you know, half of the town because of our involvement. So it's also a great way to become part of the community as well as to have a good impact. Next slide, please. So the next slide talks very much about the context. And I know this has sort of underpinned everything that has been said today, but I just want to keep it at the forefront of our minds. So I've included here quotes that are from the global level, from our very local level, from the Duke of Norfolk, and at the UK level with the RSPB. Bottom line is we know we're in trouble. And not only are we in trouble, but we're not getting out of it nearly as quickly as we need to. And we need the way to move faster is to work together. You know, we're trying to help the ecosystem to improve, and we need to work in a very systematic way. At least that was our perspective. So that's just a little bit of, you know, what motivated us to get going in the first place. So next slide, please, Hazel. So what we did, we gathered together all of the groups that were already in Arundel doing various things. Again, remember, small population. So these are 2s and 3s and 5s and 6 people. These are not gigantic organizations. They were all struggling with the same things that have been mentioned today. Water, you know, watering, people. They were competing for people, and funds. Similarly, you know, scrabbling around and often facing off against each other in terms of funding. So we decided to create an alliance that would bring everybody into the fold. All of the local greening groups are now involved. Started with a handful, but now all are involved. And in addition, we drew in other local groups that could be supportive in various ways. So the Chamber of Commerce and the Community Partnership. And on top of that, we decided that we needed to work with the 3 levels of local government, town, district, and county, as well as with our National Park Authority, because we're in the South Downs National Park. So this has evolved over 2 years, but now it's a really robust group of people that work very well together. Next slide, please, Hazel. The reason it's really robust is because we did take the time at the beginning to come together and think about our shared vision. Some people had quite radically different views on what needed to be done and how it needed to be done. So in order to be cohesive, we decided that we should get together and figure out exactly what was going to drive us forward. And so we came up with these 6 objectives, 4 of which, the first 4, are all, of course, very closely interrelated and very much reflect what the other speakers have said today. Because, again, we want to do this in a holistic manner. It's an ecosystem. But from the get-go, we absolutely wanted to do it via widespread, broad-based community engagement. So the whole well-being part, again, has been mentioned by Dave and others, was at the heart of what we wanted to do. This is about bringing people together. It's about building community at a time when society, in many respects, appears to be disintegrating. And so we wanted to include young people. We wanted to include people in care homes, people with mental health issues, all kinds of people. And we've tried to do that. And then ultimately, bottom line, we ourselves wanted to become sustainable and to do things in a way that was sustainable. So this strategy was put together in November 2023, presented to the Town Council and endorsed. And we have reported on it annually not using ecologists, but using our own measuring tools with our volunteers. Next slide, please, Hazel. So these are the volunteers. So we started literally with 5 or 6 on a very wet day that you'll see in a moment in 2023. And now we have 40 people on our books. Now, I have to say, not all 40 people come out at any one occasion. Sometimes we get up to maybe 14, but usually it's 2s and 3s and 5s and 6s, that kind of thing. But you see a selection of them in the photo on the left. And again, in the next photo where we're celebrating with our mayor. So the top photographs are all of our folks, our green team, as we call it, putting in 1,000 hours at the train station over the last couple of years. But we've been helped by lots of other people. So we've had college students come to us for their community day. We have another group coming on the 26th of this month. We've got 2 local primary schools. We've got them involved in tree planting and in growing nasturtiums from seed. We have a local charity called the Aldingbourne Trust. We actually contracted with them and are paying them to water. So we call it climate sensitive watering. So, obviously when it's drier and warmer, they come more often. And when it's wetter and cooler, they come less often. And then we had some Environment Agency folks working on the river here. So they gave us a day. So it's been very helpful to have this additional boost on top of our own Green Team volunteers. Next slide, please, Hazel. So this is our before and after. So I realized I didn't really take enough before photos because actually the 4 photos down the left-hand side, so from top to bottom, were taken on April Fool's Day, 2023, when we started our work at the station in the rain. And believe me, there were skeptics for obvious reasons. This path is 120 meters long. And in addition to that path that you see in the top left, as you see in the next photo immediately below it, the entrance to the pathway was really, really terrible, really unwelcoming, but also give the impression of being unsafe. It probably wasn't, but it certainly gave that impression. And not surprisingly, that led to lots of rubbish being thrown and left and so on and so forth. So our first day, these photographs were taken at the end of that first day instead of at the beginning. We basically just did a cleanup and a clear up. Over the course of the 2 years since, we have transformed the area, as you can see from the other photographs. The ones along the top are specifically that 120-meter path. So we put in native hedgerow plants. We pushed back the bindweed and the brambles. about 1 meter. We put in a biodegradable membrane and cover that in wood chips. And then we put in solar lights. There was absolutely no lighting on the path. And we had those nasturtiums growing by the kids. We had them adorn that raised bed in the first instance. And as others have said, the insects, the birds loved it, as did the invertebrates and all the rest of it. Then we thought, well, let's go further. You know, Arundel is a town where there are a lot of artists. We have a big arts festival here every year. So let's engage the artists at all ages and in all ways. And so that really ugly raised bed that you saw at the beginning is transformed into this amazing sunflower parade, as we call it. So kids helped to make clay petals, and then local artists put them together in these mosaics of sunflowers. And then we asked local businesses to pay £25, a modest sum, to sponsor each of those panels, and they got their name on as a result. So it's now, it's bright, it's welcoming, people stop and take photographs, has really, and the kids, of course, are super proud to see the results of their work. And then that inspired us to go further. So now we have a work of art in the waiting room, bottom in that lower left area, on loan from a professional artist. We had one last year, and we've now just replaced it with Arundel Railway, celebrating the Railway 200. We also created a woodland area, and we have a little picnic table. Like Dave, we put up signage to explain what we're doing, why we're doing. So those kind of informational signs. But then above that, we put in directional signs because a lot of people didn't even know the path existed. So we built the planter and we put in those signs. And then finally, the bottom right-hand corner, we have a local chainsaw artist who's just amazing. And he has created 2 benches for us. This first bench, I don't know how well you can see it, but it's our Arundel bench. It depicts the Arun River with mullets swimming in it. It has the South Downs on the back, with the castle and with a kingfisher representing the wetland centre. It's a marvel. And just this week, we are going to be unveiling a second bench, again in honour of Railway 200. So this is what we've been trying to do to inspire people, to get them excited, but also to make sure that what we're doing is bringing back nature. Thank you very much, Hazel. And so from the station partner idea, and I've described that already, we realized that we felt we needed to go further. We needed to create a nature recovery corridor that extended right through the town, connected with neighbouring towns, and to be part of something bigger. So we have, I'm not going to go into detail, but we have developed a new ground care management regime for our roundabouts and verges, our cemeteries and our hedges. That is much more about biodiversity and habitat, really. We changed all of the annual planting that our district and council was doing, and we designed interesting beds that are with perennials, lots and lots of herbs. I know somebody mentioned herbs, and we encourage our local businesses and people who are passing by to just use the herbs, so that again it's a fun thing, it's an engaging thing. We've got bug hotels, we've got bee bench, and we also collect coffee grounds from our cafes, and we take them to once a week we take them to our local allotments for them to use. One of our objectives is also about wildlife, and like Dave, we identified what was missing or what was in danger. So BBOB stands for Bring Back Our Birds, and that basically is swifts, swallows and house martins. I'll come back to that a little bit later, but we've put up 100 or so nests, various types of nests. And we're also working towards making more gardens wildlife friendly. so that those birds have something to eat, and that we have mud ponds so that they can build their own nests in the future. We've got a demonstration garden in town where someone who had a very manicured garden has shifted to be much more wildlife friendly. And we've trained people in how to do that measurement. So we don't use BNG. I've just taken a note of, I think it's a great idea to have an external ecologist to do that. But we have been using the pollinator online monitoring surveys, and we're trained in that, and in hedge laying, and in surveying. And we've also been not forgetting our trees. So Adam will be pleased to know we put in a blossom arc at one of our schools. We have planted disease-resistant elm. We put in purging buckthorn to help the butterflies, and we're delighted that we're getting one of the Sycamore Gap saplings, a tree of hope that will be planted soon. Thank you very much. And just to say a few words, I mean, I know this has been talked about extensively as well, but communication is key. And we've really put a lot of effort into making sure that people, that we listen to people, and that we can consult, and that we inform and explain. So that's been really helpful. What has also sort of been unexpected, but really wonderful, is that we've started to get recognition locally. We won the Community Group Cup last December. And of course, we were delighted and thrilled to win the National Community Rail Network Award for outstanding contribution to Community Rail. Thank you. We've recently been invited and accepted to be a Wheel to Waves community champion, and we're being assessed for Green Flag Awards and, in fact, for Stations in Bloom next week. And we'd like to become accredited as a nature town. So from a very humble beginning, this has kind of taken on an incredible life of its own. And this is where we're headed. Hazel, next slide, please. So, I was asked to think about what lessons and tips I could pass along to others who are following a similar path or thinking about it. I've covered all these points already, so I'll just be brief in saying that I think it was critical for us to stop, take stock, listen, and to build that shared vision. Because really the groups had been around, some for 100 years, some less than that. They were well established, they were doing their own thing, and working together was not obvious, let me say, at the beginning. So taking the time to build a shared vision and to come up with common objectives, I think is what really has made the group cohesive. But at the same time, we were savvy enough, I think, to go for wins that mattered to the individual groups. And so we tried to achieve that balance. In terms of the volunteers, obviously numbers are great, but you also want a really good mix of volunteers. Age ranges, some of the people with the most time don't necessarily have the most capability physically. And the people with the least time have the most ideas and energy, but don't necessarily have a lot of experience and skills. So having that group mix was just, again, I think, central to our success. The latent passion thing refers to the Bring Back Our Birds. We had no idea that people were so passionate about birds. We held our first ever event about swift swallows and house martins. We didn't even use Eventbrite because we thought if we get a dozen people, we'll be happy. And it was standing room only. I mean, we probably exceeded fire regulations. There were 60 plus people. And then it just took off. So that's, if you can find latent passion and sort of tap into it, I think that's great. Making sure to give credit. Bringing rewards obviously is a bonus. Keeping momentum, but not overwhelming. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And I'm not saying that we've done it most of the time. It's sometimes people feel overwhelmed because we're trying to keep momentum up. Adding value where it matters, doing things that, taking what's already there, as Dave said, and then just enhancing it a little bit so that it becomes much more powerful than it was. and making the most of what you've got, basically, seeking the multiplier effect. For example, we got 65 free plants from the RHS. We harvested the seeds, we split them, we grew them on our allotment, and that ended up being 350 plants. So that kind of thing. So we're trying to become as sustainable as possible and to make the most of what we've got. And I think this is the last slide, Hazel. And this is a big work. This is a big week for us. For the first time, we have participated in the Great Big Green Week. We have 25 plus activities and events going on. So it's a bit of a stressful time as well, I have to say. Anyway, if you want to know more, don't hesitate to contact me. I can be reached at that greenteam.arundel email address. If you'd like to check out our program, you can do that on our website or learn more about what we've done. Our website address is listed there too. And then, although I know nothing about Instagram, we have an Instagram handle or whatever it's called, and you can check that out too. On Friday, we have a big green welcome to Arundel event, and it's going to celebrate Railway 200 and everything that has been achieved. So please send positive vibes on Friday and keep your fingers crossed. Thank you very much.
Wow, just said that and I was still muted. Wow, to both of those. Again, another two whistle stop presentations with packed full of information. And so inspiring, both Buxton and Arundel. So can I ask Dave and Katrina and Janet to be ready to take questions? And I'm going to ask Neil and Adam also to be ready. I haven't been monitoring chat because I've been sharing screen, but I'm hoping that Hannah has. And we'll also look at people raising hands. But for now, we'll concentrate on chat. So Hannah, is there anybody, any questions sitting, waiting in the chat for Dave and Katrina?
I'm scrolling down. I'm trying to go through them in order. There's a lovely comment from Justy at Friends of Leg off the back of those two, talking about how environmental work can feel really lonely, and it's great to hear what people are achieving. I think that's a really important point to pick up because you know, the clue's in our name. We're a network, and as Katrina said, get in touch. I know any of the panelists today are happy for people to pick up with them, share knowledge, share experience, and just kind of make it feel less lonely. Anything specifically in terms of questions? No, I'm going back to some from before the break. There are questions around Buddleia, which Neil answered about how it's a bit of a challenge. I don't know if that's something you want to pick up on and just come in and share with everybody quickly, Neil.
Find my mute button. Yes. So the question was asked what was our opinion of it, and it varies dramatically depending on who you talk to. It is a non-native. It comes from the Himalayas, India, Pakistan area. It is liked by butterflies. It produces lots of nectar, but if they're going to that for the nectar, they're not pollinating the native plants. It causes damage to brickwork. It gets in the way of signals and overhead power lines, but it is everywhere. And as Adam pointed out, it produces tens of thousands of seeds per plant, and so spreads really well. We're not going to get rid of it. It's sort of something that we have to manage on a case-by-case basis, that where it's causing us a problem, we should be dealing with it. But where it's not, it's almost a case of we're just going to have to leave it. There's other things that we need to be sort of spending our effort on dealing with, but it's definitely a challenge. It's also not listed as one of the sort of the top invasive species. It's present now, unfortunately.
Thanks, Neil. There is a question. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll through the chat and sort of keep up with everything. Just amazing today. We have got a question about bird feeders I've just spotted. Have either of you got bird feeders on stations, or Do you know of any on stations, Neil? And if so, what designs? And have you managed to find any that stop squirrels and other rodents or vandalism and theft? So over to you guys. Anybody want to take that question?
I can't think of anywhere where we have got bird feeders. The challenge has always be you need somebody to top them up. It is quite possible that they might be in some of the areas that people on the call will be managing next to stations. I don't think there'll be any issues there. Adam may know more about the designs, and there are many designs that are allegedly rodent proof, but I'll let him describe that. It's not something that might be restricted, but I can't imagine them ever being on platforms. But the other side of the fence, I don't see an issue.
So Dave or Katrina, have you got bird boxes?
We don't. I mean, we don't have bird feeders. We have bird
feeders,
boxes. We did talk about it, and we decided that we wanted to go the natural route, and to create enough biodiversity and bioabundance to feed the birds that way. So that's what we've done. But we do have actually a family of swallows nesting at the station at the moment, and I mean, it's a natural nest. But as I said, we've put up a lot of nests around town, including at the station. So we are monitoring and keeping our fingers crossed. We know it might be a long time, as Adam said earlier. But that's what we've put our emphasis on. We focus more on the nests than on feeders.
Okay, thank you, Jana. Dave.
Yes, sorry, Hazel. Similarly at Buxton, we've avoided the issue because I know there's quite an active rodent infestation, and I think if we'd got any spillages, we'd be cautioned about contributing to rodent problems. So we avoided that. But we went down the nesting and the roosting. We've got bat roosts, we've got nesting boxes, and we're aiming to get swift boxes up there as well. We're fighting with the planners about that.
Right. Okay. Great.
There's a quick comment in reply to that question as well from Mark at Just Good Friends Club, saying that they purchased bottle feeder adapters and asked children from the local school to bring a bottle to the garden, recycling and decorating them. They were then put up in a meadow area, and they're lucky not to have any vandalism. So that's a nice way to bring in a local school. That's Robin Hood line.
That's great. Mark, if you've got any images of that, could you email them to our events, and we can share them with everyone that's been on the call today? That'd be really interesting. Adam, I don't know, did you want to pick up any of that? I know Neil mentioned that you might want to come in.
Yeah, just to say that I used to have problems with squirrels on my feeders in my garden at a different address. I bought squirrel-proof feeders and they did the job for me. I'll paste the link. I can't recommend them. All I can say is that's where I bought mine from. So they did the trick for me. It's just basically a cage that goes around them. I've still got them actually, and don't need them where I now live. So if anybody, I don't mind donating them to somebody, but I've got to get in touch with them. Someone post them to you.
It's first come, first served day.
It's a difficult subject to talk about as well. The pros and cons of whether you actually take the decision to control squirrels. But there are humane methods of doing that, and there's a trap now called a Cania trap that's very humane and very effective. But you've got to ask yourself questions: is it really necessary to control them? This was particularly damaging in the place where we did. Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. That's great. Loads of brilliant information here. I think my head's spinning with it all. I'm sure everyone's the same, but all of it is going to be available afterwards as well. I'm just reiterating that. Sarah Newman, Sarah, you've got your hand up. Do you want to jump in and ask your question?
Yes, and thank you for those presentations. They're incredibly inspiring and so deep, and the reach as well. That's what's so impressive. And I mean, I've been very interested in enhancing biodiversity at our stations in the Darent Valley for a long time, 4 years anyway. And but it occurs to me that the measurement, I don't think I have done any measurement beforehand. I've just been getting on with it, sort of thing. And as a community rail network, are we capturing all this extraordinary work that we're doing? And and how could we communicate that? Because each, all the people on this call are probably doing extraordinary things. And that's just one point about how to capture it. The other thing is that part of my work, I do work with something called the Citizens Network, and I'm trying to bring the Community Rail Network and citizens together because they sound incredibly similar in terms of its grassroots organizations trying to get things done in their communities, and just getting on with it by connecting with each other, as Katrina and the Buxton friends. Obviously, you're all doing this amazing networking. I've done a bit of it, but there's room for improvement. And I even work on other networks, and I'm not connecting myself with it. So that's even stupider. But so there's just this fantastic potential and shared knowledge that we gain from. But anyway, that's just a thought of how to link us all up.
So was there a specific question amongst that, Sarah, asking about whether we will actually
have we done much measurement? Was the first one, really,
in terms of Community Rail Network?
Yeah,
it's really down to the individual groups to do the recording, the measuring, and all of that, and to keep those records for themselves. What we try and facilitate, what part of what Community Rail Network is vital for, is sharing that practice across the network. So it's getting that out there, and that's what these webinars are ideal for. So I would say it's really, we don't gather that kind of information together. We can't really. But it's down to the individual groups to be gathering the information of their impact and so on, and then sharing that. There are other sort of ways of doing that amongst the groups as well. But if you get in touch with us separately, we can have conversations, like we can have conversations about did you say the Citizens Network? And we can have conversations around that as well. I'm just going to go, sorry, Sarah, I'll just have to leave that there. There's a couple more hands up. And I think Sam Agnew from Community Rail Network and Alex Peel probably want to jump in and pick up some of what you've been talking about there. So, Sam, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, thanks, Hazel. I just wanted to come back on that point because I think it's nice to meet everybody. I'm the Director of Member Support and Development for Community Rail Network. In my short time in the organisation, I'm getting lots of questions about what's Community Rail Network's role in collating some of these measurements and helping people to do it better. And I think it's been really positive to hear that there's a growing appetite for those kind of measurements and that evidence-based approach. It's something that's quite a live conversation in our organisation because, yes, as Hazel said, it's really good that all the individual projects are measuring success. But I do think there's something that we can look at about how we might pull together some of that really big sort of bigger picture stuff. And you'll hopefully all be aware of our social value report that we did last year, which was really powerful actually in looking at social value across the whole network. And I think where there could be some opportunities for doing this on a much bigger picture, it's something we're starting to explore what our role is in that. So really, really good question to raise for us. Yeah, and I can see Alex is probably going to come in on a similar thing about some of the tools we already have.
Yeah, do you want to jump in, Alex?
Hi, yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm just on my phone, so I'm not going to show my video because I think it'll knock me off the network. So just to pick up on what Sam said, a little bit more specific, one of the things that we look at in the project management training workshop that we do, which we run pretty regularly, is exactly what you've talked about, Sarah, is about at local level, thinking about what do we need to think about at the start and then tracking that through. Now, there's always a good time. You can start at any point, I guess, if you haven't already done it. So if you want to just give me a call and have a chat through any of those things, I'm happy to talk through some of the examples that have come up. Not got a huge amount of biodiversity ones, but as Sam said, that's something that we're going to start looking at. So yeah, I'm just in the process of setting another date for project management, and I know some people on the call today have been already. So everyone's welcome to come back again, bring a project idea and work through, and we start to look at some of those specifics around measurement and evidence. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks for setting me straight. Of course, we're instrumental in that sense. I'm really sorry we have run slightly over, but I think it's so valuable, all the information. We can't really take any more questions now, and I'm going to have to wrap up. And I hope that everyone has thoroughly enjoyed today's session. I know I don't think I've enjoyed one more actually in amongst the last few years that we've been doing them. I've learned so much about sustainable gardening, biodiversity, bioabundance. I've made some notes here, goatscaping, dead hedging, all kinds of stuff. So much inspiration today. And I'd just like to thank all of you for joining us today and all your questions and contributions. That's been wonderful. Remember that the recording will be available as a resource on our website in a few days, so you can refer back to all this really valuable information, and the slides will be available as PDFs to download. Can we all, everyone that's still on the call, can we all please show our appreciation to Neil, Adam, Dave and Katrina? So there are some reaction buttons and you can clap hands using those. If you'd like to show your appreciation, that'd be lovely. And from us to all four of you, to Neil, Adam, Dave and Katrina, thank you so much for the time and energy you've dedicated to preparing and presenting at today's webinar. It really is greatly appreciated and wonderful the work that's going on out there. A quick reminder before we do close that we do have another webinar on the 16th of July, and that's going to be focusing on the important topic of tackling antisocial behaviour. And Sam, who as you've just met now, our Director of Member Support and Development, will be hosting that webinar. And the booking link should appear in the chat at any moment if it hasn't already. And finally, the good old feedback survey. Please do take a few minutes to fill that out. It's an online survey and you can do that via a window that will pop up as we close. But we will also email the link to that and to the other webinar to everybody that's been on the call today. So thank you. So the feedback survey is very brief, by the way, and it won't take a lot of time. So it just remains for me to say thank you, everybody. Hope to see you on the next webinar. And thank you for the supporting role of Hannah in the background. That's been wonderful. And thank you, everyone, for your contributions. That's enough from me. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.